Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, it's day 2 of the government shutdown. Democrats are demanding parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill be repealed in order to reopen the government. But Republicans argue this would create loopholes for non-citizens to gain access to taxpayer-funded health care. Luis Eduardo Martinez on Capitol Hill. As the blame game continues, the White House hinting that these government agencies will be slashed. Mario Tsu at the White House. Amid the shutdown, the White House cancels nearly $8 billion in federal funding for energy projects, many of them for renewable energy. Jack Bradley reports. A terror attack on a synagogue in the UK leaves 2 dead and 3 seriously wounded. Police say they have identified the attacker and have arrested 2 additional suspects. What Prime Minister Keir Starmer is saying about the tragedy. Some displaced residents in the Gaza Strip said they are hoping Hamas will accept President Trump's plan to end the war. Meanwhile, Israeli forces detain over 400 pro-Palestine activists attempting to sail to the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry with the details.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. It's day 2 of the government shutdown. The House and Senate are not voting on bills today, and both Republicans and Democrats appear dug in on their positions as hundreds of thousands of federal workers are at risk of being furloughed or laid off. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
They have made a decision that they would rather give taxpayer-funded benefits to illegal aliens than to keep the doors open for the American people, to keep vital services, veteran services, healthcare and nutrition for women, infants, and children. They would rather not pay the troops and TSA agents and Border Patrol agents. They would rather stop services of FEMA in the middle of a hurricane season than to do the right thing.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson detailed how the Democratic proposal to reopen the government would repeal parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill that closed the loopholes that allowed for non-citizens to access taxpayer-sponsored health care.
Donald Trump and Republicans shut the federal government down because they don't want to provide health care to working-class Americans.
Democrats have not shied away from publicly stating that they forced a government shutdown because Republicans, who are in the majority in the House and in the Senate, would not acquiesce to their policy demands.
The reason we're having this government shutdown is because Democrats are standing up for health care for Americans and their families, and Republicans are refusing to change direction.
Republicans are open to negotiate the extension of health care tax credits under the Affordable Care Act, but not while the government is shut down.
All the pressure should be on the 44 Democrats who are dug in to try to pander to the far left corner of their base. That's what this is. How important is it to appeal to the radical left of your base and hurt Americans? Because if they drag this on through the weekend, more and more people will be hurt.
Some 750,000 federal workers are at risk of being furloughed, and thousands are at risk of losing their jobs altogether if the administration is forced to enact reductions in force of agencies and departments if the government shutdown continues. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The political messaging war continuing as the government shutdown reaches its 2nd day, and the White House signaling that certain government agencies will be cut. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent, Mario Tsu at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the White House saying about layoffs?
Tiff, good evening. Yes, the White House today is saying that it's likely that thousands of federal workers will be laid off. And President Trump says that he's meeting today with Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, to discuss and talk about making temporary or permanent cuts to Democrat agencies that the president calls a political scam. Here's Press Secretary Leavitt this morning saying which agencies they'll look into. Watch.
Look, we're going to look at agencies that don't align with the administration's values that we feel are a waste of the taxpayer dollar. And so the president wants to be a good steward of the American taxpayer dollar during a time when our balance sheet is looking very grim because the Democrats chose to shut the government down.
This is just the latest action in the administration's broader push to cut federal workers and slash down on government spending. Russ Vought on Wednesday told House Republicans that mass firings of federal workers will start in just 1 or 2 days. President Trump has said a shutdown is the last thing that he wants, but he also says he can't believe that, quote, radical left Democrats are giving him this unprecedented opportunity to get rid of certain agencies. Tiff.
And Mari, the administration is also doubling down on its message to universities. Tell us more about the letters they sent this week.
Sure, Tiff. So on Wednesday night, the White House sent out letters to 9 elite universities around the nation, offering them priority access to federal grants and funding if they agree to the administration's demands. And those demands include creating a better environment for conservatives on campus, cutting departments that spark violence against conservatives and conservative ideas, freezing tuition for 5 years, and banning the use of sex or race in admissions and hiring processes. The Trump administration has now battled for months universities over anti-Semitism and DEI claims, and Columbia and Brown University have recently been struck multi-million-dollar deals with the Trump administration. Here's the president earlier this week teasing a deal about Harvard.
I guess we reached a deal with Harvard today, so we'll see how that. All you have to do is paper it, right, Linda? Just yes, sir. Paper it out. So this would be a giant trade school, series of trade schools. It would be run by Harvard. Now, this is something that we're close to finalizing. We haven't done it yet. But they'd put up $500 million. Interest and everything else would go to that account, meaning go to the trade school.
So we are soon expecting new details about that $500 million Harvard settlement, which could require Harvard to start its own network of trade schools. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. The White House is canceling nearly $8 billion in federal funding for hundreds of energy projects. That's as the Trump administration says it will use the government shutdown as an opportunity to slash wasteful spending. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
The White House is issuing major funding cuts across several federal agencies in an attempt to slash wasteful spending amid a government shutdown. The Department of Energy announced that it's cutting $7.6 billion in energy projects. Those projects are in 16 states, including California and New York, and many of them are for renewable energy projects like wind and solar. In total, 320 awards are being canceled, and of those, get this, over 25% were issued after Election Day and before Inauguration Day, those alone totaling over $3 billion. Energy Secretary Chris Wright took to X Thursday saying, quote, President Trump promised to protect taxpayer dollars and expand America's supply of affordable, reliable, and secure energy. These cancellations deliver on that commitment. Russ Vought, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, likewise wrote on X, quote, nearly $8 billion in Green New Scam funding to fuel the left's climate agenda is being canceled. And all of this comes after late Wednesday night when President Trump took to Truth Social saying Republicans must use this opportunity of the Democrat forced closure, referring to the government shutdown, to clear out dead wood, wastes, and fraud. Billions of dollars can be saved. These cuts come as the Department of Transportation's cutting race-based policies. The department issued an interim final rule barring federal grants from going to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs. Programs like the department's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise program, which has for years downgraded certain races while upgrading others that are deemed disadvantaged. This has allowed women and minority business owners to receive more access to this program solely based on their race or gender. In the same statement, the Department of Transportation says that it's freezing around $18 billion in funding to 2 major projects in New York City. It's to review whether these projects are practicing DEI. The projects impacted include the Hudson Tunnel and the 2nd Avenue subway extension, which the department says are arguably the 2 largest projects of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. For NTD News, I'm Jack Bradley.
2 people were killed today and 3 others seriously wounded in an attack on a synagogue in the British city of Manchester. Authorities say they identified the suspect as Jihad al-Shami, a 35-year-old British citizen of Syrian descent. They have declared the incident a terrorist attack.
At this time, we know that a car was driven directly at members of the public outside the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue on Middleton Road, Crumpsall, in Manchester. The driver of the car was seen then to attack people with a knife. He was wearing about his body a vest which had the appearance of an explosive device. There were a large number of worshippers attending the synagogue at the time of this attack.
Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values.
Well, it's obviously it's a bit eerie. Obviously, no one knows the full story of what's gone on yet, but we know the basics, and it's devastating to hear on the holiest day of the year for the Jewish community.
I think just everyone's concerned, everybody's worried, everybody's scared, and we shouldn't be scared to feel or believe in what we believe.
Attacker killed 2 members of the local Jewish community. 3 other men remain in the hospital with serious injuries. Police shot and killed the attacker. They also arrested 3 other people suspected of commissioning, preparing, and instigating terrorism. There are 2 men in their 30s and a woman in her 60s. The UK senior counter-terrorism officer said an investigation is underway. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemned the attack, saying he was appalled. He cut short his visit to Denmark to chair an emergency response meeting in London following the attack. The Prime Minister said the UK must defeat rising anti-Semitism and vowed to do everything to keep the Jewish community in the UK safe. He added that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country. In the Middle East, some residents in the Gaza Strip expressed hope that the Hamas terrorist group will accept President Trump's plan to end the war. Meanwhile, Israeli forces detained over 400 pro-Palestine activists who attempted to sail to the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Thursday, residents in the Gaza Strip were seen sheltering along the beach as they wait to see whether the Hamas terrorist group will accept the Gaza peace plan. The 20-point plan recently put forth by President Trump says that no one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. Some local residents shared their thoughts on it.
As for what was proposed by U.S. President Trump or someone else, whoever that person is, I agree with it. Because honestly, we are officially tired, we are exhausted.
Any proposal, God willing, will be in the people's interest to cease fire, stop the suffering. Yesterday at the crossing, my nephew and his entire family were killed in a single shell. Every day, we bid farewell to our children, our loved ones, our brothers, and our friends.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that President Trump wants to hear back from Hamas very soon.
We expect and we hope that Hamas will accept the plan that was proposed by Special Envoy Witkoff. It's a good plan, and as you know, it's been applauded by leaders all over the world.
Meanwhile, Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, had this message for Hamas.
They should know this. It can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done. If they reject the plan, Israel will finish the job and bring every hostage home.
And on Thursday, Israel said it's giving residents their last opportunity to evacuate Gaza City, one of Hamas's final strongholds.
We are going, fleeing from death because there was shelling. There was shelling, so we all ran. Our whole building left, and we left too.
In another development, Israeli forces intercepted about 40 boats carrying 400 pro-Palestine activists who were attempting to sail to the Gaza Strip and deliver aid to residents. Swedish activist Greta Thunberg was on board one of the boats in the flotilla, which Israel says was paid for by the Hamas terrorist organization. In a post on X, Israel's prime minister thanked the Israeli Navy for their efforts, saying their actions, quote, prevented the entry of dozens of vessels into a war zone. Jason Berry, NTD News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin responds to President Trump calling Moscow a paper tiger. The Kremlin also says peace in Ukraine hasn't come any closer since the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Postar has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday, responding to comments by President Trump. Trump recently posted on social media saying Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years. It is very much making them look like a paper tiger. Putin responded on Thursday, saying Russia has been advancing on all fronts, despite Ukraine's support from the NATO alliance.
We are fighting with the entire NATO bloc, advancing at this rate and feeling very confident. If we're a paper tiger despite all this, then what is NATO?
And a Russian spokesman accuses Europe of trying to prolong the fighting in Ukraine. Dmitry Peskov says peace in Ukraine has not come closer after a summit between President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin in Alaska in August.
There are factors which make the process more difficult. From our point of view, the main factor is the position of the EU, which is encouraging the Kyiv regime to continue war.
This comes as Ukraine is requesting Tomahawk missiles from the US. The missiles have a reach of over 1,500 miles, far enough to hit Moscow if fired from Ukraine. The US hasn't approved the request yet. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the decision now depends on President Trump.
Last time we had very good meeting, very productive dialogue, and we spoke about long-range missiles, long-range weapon. We spoke about it, so we will see. Everything depends on his decision.
In more positive news, Russia and Ukraine report exchanging prisoners of war. Both sides say they received over 180 soldiers and 20 civilians. According to Russia, the swap was in line with agreements reached at the last round of peace talks in Istanbul in July. And French police have arrested the captain and the first officer of a sanctioned Russian tanker. The vessel is suspected of operating for Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Authorities also say it may have been involved in recent airspace violations in Denmark by foreign drones. The tanker was around 50 miles south of Denmark's capital when drone activity forced the closure of the city's airport. The Kremlin says it has no information about the vessel. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
200,000 people took to the streets in France today, according to the government's figures. Protesters called for better funding for schools, hospitals, and pensions. NTD international correspondent David Yves reports from Paris.
This is the third week that the French have taken to the streets in a major mobilization. Hundreds of thousands are expected to demonstrate today against low and middle income classes and against France's government. Despite having the highest taxes policy in the world, many demonstrators said the quality of public services continues to decline. Protesters marched in more than 240 French cities, demanding an end to spending cuts and a reversal of pension reforms. Union leaders said President Emmanuel Macron and his new Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu are pushing workers to shoulder the weight of France's public debt while neglecting basic services.
We need more resources in hospitals to be able to work properly and, above all, to properly care for patients. But you can open all the beds you want. If there isn't staff around them, you're putting patients in danger. And that explains why we now see 10, 11, even 12 hours of waiting. What's dramatic is that there has been an excessively high number of patients found dead on gurneys.
We have an issue. The situation is completely unbalanced. Work no longer pays, and so the burden of France's debt is being placed only on the workers. Since the beginning of President Macron's term, we've had this problem of not listening to the people in the streets and the workers.
Retirees are getting less and less money, and students too. There are fewer and fewer scholarships. Some of them that are with us can't even afford a €1 meal per day, and that's a real problem.
To prevent violence, authorities deployed 76,000 police officers nationwide. While the protests remain largely peaceful, union leaders vowed more strikes and rallies in the weeks ahead if the government does not abandon its planned cuts. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up, authorities say violence outside ICE facilities continues to rise. They're gearing up to increase federal manpower unless local leaders provide more support. Jason Blair brings us the latest. Protests and criticism didn't stop the city of Philadelphia from raising a communist flag. Arlene Richards has what Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano has to say about the incident. And a California man has been sentenced in connection with 2 major wildfires. Officials say he intentionally started the fires, which forced evacuations and caused widespread damage. Christina Corona reports from the West Coast when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Justice Department says that groups that appear to be well-funded have been causing problems outside ICE facilities in Portland and Chicago. The Department of Homeland Security says it's getting ready to send more agents to the Portland facility as assaults continue to increase. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
In a memorandum titled Ending Political Violence Towards ICE, Attorney General Pam Bondi says that groups posted outside of ICE facilities in Portland and Chicago, quote, have been well organized and appear to be well funded. The document says near Chicago, rioters arrived with boxes of fireworks, N95 masks, gas masks, goggles, knee and elbow protection, and large quantities of food and water.
More than 200 violent rioters were at a Chicago ICE facility chanting, "Arrest ICE, shoot ICE."
The memorandum continues. Likewise, rioters in Portland, Oregon have repeatedly attacked and laid siege to an ICE processing center.
Anyone who threatens or assaults our federal officers will be arrested and charged federally, not in some liberal state court. Same goes for anyone who's funding and aiding these extremists.
The acting director for Immigration and Customs Enforcement says that the department is ready to send more agents to Portland. He tells Fox News that officers are facing Antifa-linked violence on a nightly basis.
But we're out there every night battling, people that are bringing sticks, bats, shields, throwing their own CS grenades at us. So it's not a peaceful situation. It's not First Amendment.
Lyons says that they've called on local and state officials to help, but haven't received much and are ready to act themselves.
They're planning right now, and I think we're holding to kind of see what Portland's going to do, but we're prepared to go ahead and protect our men and women of ICE.
Portland Police Chief Bob Day says that the police are working closely with their federal partners, but says the area outside of the ICE building is just one small area of the city.
The facility itself is managed and governed by the Federal Protective Service, and they have responsibility for that. And the incidents you speak of, for example, last night, occurring on their property. But Portland is very much engaged. And once again, this is just one small block in a big city that we're trying to manage for all the Portlanders.
There are social media videos circulating showing assaults and violence happening outside of the ICE building in Portland. One reporter from the post-millennial, Katie Daviscourt, was seen getting struck by a pole while working, resulting in a black eye. Jason Blair, NTD News.
The Department of Homeland Security tells NTD that on Tuesday night, quote, over 100 rioters stormed an ICE facility in Portland. They assaulted law enforcement, even putting one member of law enforcement into the hospital. The department added that officers also faced blinding strobe lights. 6 arrests were made on charges including assaulting law enforcement. Philadelphia raised the flag of Communist China at City Hall this week, despite criticism and protests from human rights activists and legislators. Here's more.
On Tuesday, the city of Philadelphia allowed an event to go forward that included the raising of a communist flag, despite strong pushback from community leaders. The event, which was co-organized by a group with ties to the Chinese Communist Party, commemorated the CCP's National Day, the anniversary of when the Communist Party declared its rule in China in 1949. Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano said it was a terrible idea to raise a flag that represents the CCP.
It's
Philadelphia is the birthplace of liberty, where our Declaration and our Constitution were signed. Documents that are rooted in freedom and human dignity. The communist Chinese flag is the opposite of all of that. You think about the Chinese that fled after Mao took over China, Chiang Kai-shek's forces, and the irony is not lost on me.
Philadelphia resident Dr. Jessica Russo said she thinks it's insulting that the city raised the flag. She said there are a lot of city residents who escaped persecution in China. As a board member of Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, Russo believes the flag represents mass murder.
This is a regime that's killed over 80 million people since it took over China in 1949. And it's killed millions of Hong Kong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience through forced organ harvesting. And we have so many hospitals in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and throughout the United States that are working with China, that are training Chinese physicians who will likely go back and do these transplants. We have pharmaceutical companies that are doing clinical trials in China. There are just so many ways that the U.S. and Philadelphia in particular is tied into China.
Mastriano also reflected on the mass killings.
What kind of madman thinks it's a great idea to raise a flag of a country that has 100,000 deaths on their hands, up to 400 million aborted babies, almost 500 million babies aborted with the one-child policy, a regime that continues to attack Christians and arresting pastors, destroying churches, going after the Uyghurs, the Muslim majority out west, going after Falun Gong, any ethnic majority that are reaping the organs of many prisoners, such as Falun Gong especially, a $1 billion organ industry they're doing, the mass surveillance of their country.
This is not the first time that Philadelphia, site of the Constitution's signing, has raised the 5-star flag of Communist China. It held a similar event in 2019. Russo attributes these events partly to the city's relationship with a Chinese city since 1976.
Our sister city is Tianjin, which is actually known for doing thousands of transplants. Very well known for this.
Russo said China's communist ideologies have infiltrated American cities across the country.
They are trying to make us believe that what they are doing is good. They are trying to silence us regarding all of their crimes against humanity, their human rights abuses. And they're doing this in potentially very subtle ways as well as overt ways. Actually, the host organization for this China flag raising works very closely with an organization called the United Front. And this is something that the Chinese Communist Party came up with to ensure that overseas their agenda would be carried out.
Mastriano said this event impacts America's credibility on human rights.
This does endorse and promote the policies and ongoing activities of the Communist China Party within China. It acknowledges the fact that we're going to ignore the atrocities and overlook this, all in the goal of having better cultural ties. What does that even mean? I just don't know what's going on. Philadelphia for 7 years is a Democrat leadership here. It's time for a change because these people don't know what they're doing.
A Southern California man has been sentenced to 16 years to life in prison for sparking 2 devastating wildfires in the San Bernardino Mountains last year. The fire destroyed thousands of acres and damaged multiple structures. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Prosecutors say 35-year-old Justin Halstenberg ignited 2 fires in September 2024, the massive Line Fire and the smaller Bacon Fire. The Line Fire scorched nearly 44,000 acres, destroyed and damaged multiple structures, and forced thousands of residents to evacuate. 6 firefighters were also injured, and the firefight cost tens of millions of dollars in resources. Investigators tied Halstenberg to the blazes using license plate readers, surveillance video, and DNA found on homemade incendiary devices. He was arrested at his home in Norco on September 10th. On Wednesday, Halstenberg was sentenced to 16 years to life in prison. He was convicted in May of 9 counts of arson, including aggravated arson and possession of flammable materials. San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson said Halstenberg's intent was sheer destruction and devastation, adding that the mountain communities will feel the impact for years. Officials say his conviction prevents a serial arsonist from further further threatening the county. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, Senate Democrats say their health care demands must be met in order for the government to reopen. But the White House says the Democratic proposal would result in billions of dollars going toward health care for illegal immigrants and other non-citizens over the next decade. Ed Heiselmeyer from the Heritage Foundation joins us to discuss. Coming up. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. It's day 2 of the government shutdown. Democrats are demanding parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill be repealed in order to reopen the government. But Republicans argue this would create loopholes for non-citizens to gain access to taxpayer-funded health care. Joining us now to discuss is Ed Heiselmeyer. He's a senior research fellow specializing in healthcare policy at the Heritage Foundation's DeVos Center for Human Flourishing. And thank you so much for joining us. Now, the White House says the Democratic proposal would result in nearly $200 billion in healthcare for illegal immigrants and other non-citizens over the next decade. In your view, is this a fair assessment of how many illegal immigrants would benefit from the Democratic proposal?
Well, it is, because what they're working off of is the scoring that the Congressional Budget Office gave to the reconciliation bill, or as the White House calls it, the One Big Beautiful Bill, back in July. And they scored certain provisions that were added to that bill to limit who could get onto these programs. And so if you undo them, those savings would turn into spending. So, yeah, the number is pretty obvious.
Now, delving into here a bit, the Paragon Health Institute says it found that at least 6.4 million people were improperly enrolled in Obamacare exchange plans. Now, that's about a quarter of total enrollment, with the taxpayer cost projected to surpass $27 billion this year. First, what do you make of those numbers, and what's the solution here?
Well, those numbers seem to be roughly in the ballpark. We don't have hard and fast numbers, but we have a lot of indications that there was a lot of fraud going on during the Biden COVID extra subsidies in the ACA, and that was not dealt with in this last bill. So that's another problem that needs to be dealt with here. The reason for that fraud is largely because the extra subsidies allowed people with low incomes to go from paying nominal premiums. They were paying maybe $25 a month for very comprehensive coverage. I mean, 90% of it was paid for by the taxpayer. From that to no premium, and that allowed fraudsters to manipulate it without their knowledge. People were being signed up without their knowledge, and the fraudsters would collect a commission from the insurance company, who didn't know that this wasn't a real person, or they would change the insurance of somebody. It was a huge mess. And the other problem with that, by the way, is that those individuals whose identities were essentially misused or stolen, they could wind up with an unexpected tax bill if, when they go to file their taxes, the IRS comes back to them and says, well, according to this, you got all this money for health insurance. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I never signed up for that.
And what would be a solution for the health care plan that Democrats want that Republicans would agree to?
Well, the Republicans are basically, there's 2 points to this. One is that there's an immediate need for a continuing resolution, and that's what they're fighting over right now. The Republicans have on the table one that says, look, we'll just keep everything the way it is until almost the end of November 21st, and then we'll move on from there, because they hope to have appropriations bills done. So right now, that's the issue. Down the road, they're going to have to revisit it, assuming that even passes, in November. And what we've been suggesting is a whole package of reforms and saying, look, this is not just about getting rid of these extra COVID subsidies. And by the way, there's a lot of stuff that was handed out during COVID that has now expired. This is the only one that hasn't, and it will expire at the end of the year if they don't continue it. So there's more to this that needs to be reformed. What was done in the reconciliation bill was a start, but there's more that needs to be done. So that's what we're talking to members of Congress about, is saying, use this actually as a positive opportunity to do further reforms.
And on the issue of healthcare fraud, how has the One Big Beautiful Bill dealt with this issue of fraud? Do you see that as successful?
Well, it has addressed some of the issues. The immigration issue is a good example because the law talks in many places about lawfully present, but there are lots of people who are in this country who are lawfully present, but that's not the same thing as being a permanent resident. So, for example, if you're here on a tourist visa, you're lawfully present. You've been allowed into the country. If you're here as a diplomat or a member of a diplomat's family, you're lawfully present, but that doesn't mean you've been admitted as a permanent resident and eligible to get benefits like Medicare, Medicaid, or things like that. So, and this is the Biden administration abused this when it came to things like people who were granted immigration parole or temporary status. So that was what the bill did in July, was to tighten up a lot of that.
Now, on a different note, a Pew Research poll recently found that 7 out of 10 Americans say health insurance companies have too much influence on health policy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they certainly have influence on it, but they're not the only ones. Personally, I would rank them. The ones that I think have the biggest influence are hospitals. Hospitals have far more influence than health insurance companies or physicians, for that matter. And of course, then there's drug companies. There's a lot of interest groups in this. I mean, remember, this is about almost a quarter of the economy. It's a fifth of the economy, 20% of the economy. So as you can imagine, there are lots of stakeholders with a lot of influence in this. But I would rank them below hospitals. I think those are by far the biggest. And partly that's because every congressperson has a hospital in his or her district, and they're going to come and say, oh, you've got to give us more money.
And in your view, what would be the best thing to happen next when it comes to the government shutdown and potential reopening and eventual reopening?
Well, again, I think, look, they made some good reforms in a number of these programs in July in the reconciliation bill. This is an incremental, this is not going to be, you're not going to reform the whole system overnight. You're going to have to take it one step at a time. So fine, you did some good things. Now let's move on and do another set of things. And there's plenty that can be done in terms of making the system work less expensively, but also better for the people who are receiving it. To provide better care for people who need help. So there are lots of things that can be done to improve the quality, to reduce the cost, to make the system more efficient. Yes, you're just going to have to take it one step at a time. So the next opportunity might be this, might be another bill next year. We'll see.
Well, Ed Heiselmeyer, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And who do you think is at fault for the government shutdown? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National in D.C. to hear from the people.
Who do you think is to blame for this government shutdown?
Both sides, but mostly I think it's on the left. All the left wants to do, for the most part, is make sure there's enough money for illegal aliens to have health care.
Both sides. If they don't get what they want, they're not going to let the other side have it. And I think that that's the issue with our government right now.
I'm not quite sure who's to blame. I don't think that it was an easy thing probably for individually for people.
The little news I've read is it seems like Democrats are doing the shutdown to protect healthcare. If someone is fighting for healthcare for more people, that's something I'm going to support.
From my understanding, it's the Democrats because they want to add a bunch of expenditures. There was a bill that was passed a little bit ago that they agreed on and that's in place now, and they want to take some of that back. So,
I mean, I'm a Medicaid provider, and I'm in, my provider base is for people who can't afford health insurance. So I think it's an important stand that the Democratic Party has taken.
So do you think illegal immigrants should get health care?
No, that money should go to the U.S. citizens.
They need to get health care, but our country can't afford to give it to them. We can't afford to give health care to our own people even.
Well, I think there's already a law that prohibits that. I think that Republicans are being very disingenuous in saying that that's the reason why they don't think that, the Democratic Party or the senators or Congress people have a point.
I know if you show up at the emergency room and you're undocumented, you get treated because, you wouldn't want to be asking for someone's papers when, their life is in danger. But I wouldn't want healthcare for people who are here illegally. I didn't know if that was a program or not.
I'm not sure to what extent the health care goes to people that do not have, that are here illegally. However, I think that health is a human right. So
I'm all for immigration, but legal immigration. And as far as health care, there's too many of our citizens that don't have health care. So whether it's selfish or not, or self-serving or not, I don't think that people who are not citizens should have it if our citizens don't have it.
As ICE says they are facing, quote, a consistent battle every night with Antifa in Portland. Antifa protests reportedly have legal observers making police reluctant to step in. Hear from a 20-year DHS veteran about the realities in Portland tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up in his new memoir, Under Siege, Eric Trump reveals the unprecedented attacks his family has faced and why he says their fight is about saving the nation. We're on the First Son's latest interview on American thought leaders with Yania Kellick when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In a new memoir titled Under Siege, President Trump's son Eric offers a first-hand account of his family's fight to, in his words, save the nation. NTD's Daniel Monahan has takeaways from Eric Trump's recent interview on American Thought Leaders with Yania Kellick. Watch.
Eric Trump says he has long been deeply involved in his family's legacy. One moment he recalls vividly was being handed the reins of the Trump Organization when his father went to Washington and the legal troubles that soon followed.
I became the most subpoenaed person in arguably American history. I got 112 subpoenas in a very short period of time. And these are like big subpoenas, right? From Senate, from Congress, from the biggest AGs in the country, DAs in the country.
He says Under Siege details thousands of behind-the-scenes stories of how opponents tried to dismantle his family in what he calls the greatest political movement in American history.
They wanted to see our family out of business. They wanted to see us bankrupt. They wanted to see my father in jail. They wanted to see me in jail. They wanted to see the Trump name off of every building around the globe. They wanted to break up our relationships. They wanted to break up the family ties I have with my siblings. They wanted to break up his relationship with Melania. You know, they raided our homes. They tried to impeach him. They, again, stripped him off of social media. I mean, Boko Haram, the Ayatollah, the Taliban, Hezbollah, they all had Twitter accounts. But guess who couldn't? If the 45th president of the United States, he couldn't have a Facebook account.
Trump discussed the attempts on his father's life and the assassination of his friend Charlie Kirk, accusing the left of resorting to violence when they can't win with the power of their ideas.
It's crazy the times that we live in, and never did I think that the country would get to this point. At the same time, I can tell you universally, people are sick and tired of the games and nonsense, and they're all seeing it. And I think that's why you've had the mass exodus from the Democratic Party in this country.
Trump says the so-called radical left isn't hiding who they are anymore.
We know exactly who they are. They're the ones who will call you a fascist, yet sit on a rooftop in all black, holding a sniper rifle, and shoot somebody who's peacefully exercising their First Amendment right.
The first son says he was on the steps of the courthouse every day during his father's New York trials, yelling and screaming about how rigged the whole case was.
And I remember after 34 felony convictions, he turned around, shook my hand, we walked out together. He looked at me, he goes, I don't know how, but we're going to win.
As for going into politics himself, Trump says he'll never rule anything out, but he's not someone who needs to be in the spotlight. But Trump acknowledges the need for true leaders in government instead of career politicians.
The person who's never signed the front of a check is writing legislation that's going to apply to every business and every person in our country. The person that doesn't know the first thing about healthcare is making decisions for the lives of millions of people. It doesn't seem to compute. You see all these, 20-year-old kids who get into politics, i.e. Joe Biden, and they're in politics for 50 years and then they become president, and you wonder why our country is totally dysfunctional.
But he says getting titans of business like his dad to make the necessary sacrifices is no easy task.
There's not a lot of courageous people out there, truly, and of the Fortune 500 crowd, and very few of them would say, listen, I'm going to sacrifice all of it to run against 16 Republicans who actually know a damn about, or know something about politics, which we did not, and then have to run against somebody like Hillary Clinton, one of the great political dynasties of modern times, only in the off chance of being able to win at a 5-to-1 financial deficit, self-funding your whole campaign. Like, give me another billionaire who would agree to those terms. Zero, right?
Some of the proceeds of the book Under Siege will go to Turning Point USA in the memory of Charlie Kirk.
They thought they could silence us. They thought they could just remove his voice with, a $1 bullet. They were wrong. They can't do that. And in fact, it's a law of unintended consequences that the exact opposite is happening. I think our voice is stronger than it's ever been right now.
Under Siege, My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation by Eric Trump will be released worldwide on October 14th. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's found